Hi, Geraint.
Hi, how's it going?
Good, good. Good to see you again. And soon
Yes.
after our first chat about uh, our baby.
Yep.
Sounds Freudian, I know, but anyway, authors refer from time to time to their books uh, as babies. So any whatever Freudian nuance aside, it has been great working with you, and I hope that the viewers who took the time to watch our first video about this book, um, A New Copernican Turn, also found enjoyable our conversation. So the conversation can be found on the YouTube channel of AIOCS, the Australian Institute for Orthodox Christian Studies, which is a not-for-profit I set up together with a friend, Wagdi Samir, who's doubly qualified. He's a doctor of mathematics and a doctor of theology. And well, we are still seeking our path. So this
And you
is
get to this point when there must have been a moment of creation. And as a
okay. Well,
Belgian,
that was a strong statement on behalf of Geraint. A moment of creation. I know but theological bells toll about creation. But anyway, I hope this has been an enjoyable conversation for the viewers. Almost 80 now, and some of them engaging. Actually, 5 people liked it. This is pretty rare on my channel. So it must be it must be you, Geraint, because otherwise when I on my own or have other guests, there are so many likes. Yeah, okay, and comments. Woo.
yeah, that's good. That's
Okay.
good. Yeah.
So would you like to revisit anything from what we said last time? I don't know, to tune up something or complete a sentence that was broken because of
No,
my nasty introductions
no,
interrupt.
no, no. I mean, look, I think last week was really good about discussing essentially my viewpoint on the scientific view of modern cosmology, and I think we've chatted about this over the years about how we're continuously making discoveries in cosmology that are painting a picture where we find out more and more and more about the universe that sort of agrees with this overall picture we have the universe born in a big bang, it's expanding, etc. And this is work I was doing a year and a half ago or so now that we had published on measuring the rate that time passes in the universe. And so what we find is that when we look through our telescopes, we actually see the distant universe running in slow motion. So, and the further back we look, the slower and slower it appears to be. It appears to us through our telescopes, and again, this is one of those kind of cool results that sort of expected from our mathematical picture of the universe that was originally laid down by Einstein and Lemaitre and Friedman, etc. That we should see this, so we get this confirmation that our mathematics works. But on the flip side, as we gather more observations, we start to find more tensions. So where things should be working, just getting better and better and better, there are places where there's a bit of friction, and so there are various tensions, as they called it. Some of your viewers, if look at any sort of cosmology news, will hear about something called the Hubble tension,
Yeah.
that different measurements of the rate of expansion are coming out to be different, and they should be the same. And I work in an area known as the dipole tension, and this is to do with our fact that we know that we are not a fundamental observer in the universe. We're not what's known as a co-moving observer. We have motion with respect to expansion, and that motion should be projected onto our observations. And it is, but again, observations that we collect at different wavelengths don't agree when they should. So people, and of course, we're talking about science at the sort of hairy edge of what's possible. And when you're working in that regime, that's when you're the most sensitive to biases in your approach or noise in your data. And so, it could be that as we gather more data, everything settles down and comes together. Or potentially more excitingly, as we gather more data, these discrepancies will move apart and it will suggest that we are missing something in our understanding of the universe. So again, cosmology, as it advances from a scientific point of view, always get more data, always feel like we have a better understanding about what's going on, but also always turns up more discrepancies and tensions, which makes it interesting.
It is exciting.
Yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
You are almost as heroic as the theologians who grapple with God, who's such an elusive entity slash idea slash concepts slash whatever you like, dots, dots, dots. And it's tantalizing to try to delve into the mystery, grasp, the fringes of the mystery, and then the mystery still escapes. So in a way, I think, regardless of how different our object of work might be, we are both, I think, doomed.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's hunting for the mysterious, right?
Yeah.
And of course, again, I don't want to put myself in your mind, but I guess we're both thinking that we're after some sort of ultimate, and I do hate the word in science, but I'm going to put it in air quotes, truth, right? Is that's what we're trying to find. And at some level, I think that we have an inner hope, and again, hope that that we will find that truth someday, but we also know that it may always remain elusive. I'm in physics. I mean, that's the case. We know that we're hunting this ultimate underlying stuff to the universe, but we may never find it. We may never get to the bottom. And so, I think there are parallels, but of course, we also have our differences in how we see the universe.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. But regardless of how exotic you might think of theology and theologians, to be, uh, from a certain viewpoint, we are really experiencing the same kind of exciting uh, whirlpool, research-wise, when it comes to the ultimate reality. And I think from a certain viewpoint, this brings us back to something that most of us have forgotten that, well, sorry to put it this way, but we are both whitish, yeah, Europeanish. You are really European because you're born.
Born in Britain, yes. No,
Yes,
no. So actually, so now, as I'm British, I'm no longer European.
you
I'm
are no longer Europe. Well, you are
I,
geographically.
I'm off the coast of Europe, right?
Okay,
That's
you are geographically and culturally European. I'm Eastern European, so let's cut to the chase and say Europeans. We have forgotten something fundamental about Europe that whether we like it or not, um, uh, we all draw on the same, let's call them classical sources, classical antiquity, where there was this mindset that sort of impelled um the Greeks and determined their quest for what they called the actual reality, the ultimate reality. And I think this is something that both you and I are seeking. Scientists, theologians, uh, we are motivated by this quest of finding out the ultimate reality. And by the way, one of my favorite authors and on whose contributions I spent the last 10 years or so, more or less continuously, Clement of Alexandria, who died in 215 AD or thereabouts. Um, he came up with something that is really strange. I haven't found that one before, but should be from the Platonist tradition. Uh, that faith and science have the same source etymologically. So he says episteme, yeah, science, and pistis. They even sound, I pronounce as Greek as possible, Greek-like as possible, so that you get the sense of sharedness. Episteme, pistis, st. And Clement says, well, they both come from the verb istimi, or the noun stasis, which means to be located somewhere, but also to inhabit that place with serenity, which is an attitude of inner peace on the one hand, but on the or peace in regard to whatever the noise that you mentioned around,
Hmm.
that pollutes our mind and so on and so forth. But on the other hand, this is a positive attitude of receptiveness to reality. And the more we cultivate this stasis, this kind of inner peace that builds a capacity for research and knowledge, the more we become attuned to reality. And again, a hopeful perspective, to return to your point about hope. Uh, in time, we hope that we will be able to um, uh, pinpoint the ultimate reality. And I think to an extent, this is the same quest that you have, and I have. Uh, but there's something that Clement also built. Uh, he was a very complex person, really, a complex thinker. I think had he lived today, he would have been definitely a scientist, not a philosopher, not a theologian, or perhaps a theologian, but also a scientist, primarily scientist. You're so keen to know as much as possible. Uh, and he said, well, yeah, but there's always this thing that reality resists our, I don't know, inquiry, resists our rationalizations, our articulation of what we find. And ultimately, we have to dance between these poles of the desire to know, which propels our whatever desire to keep going and digging. On the other hand, this sense of, well, we might, as you said, we might never know the ultimate reality, which is funny, and I'll give you the floor back. Um, it reminds me of what Roger Penrose said in that book I mentioned last time, whatever, I keep forgetting its title, With the Shadows of the Mind or whatever. The Emperor's New Clothes, that
Hmm.
where he said, well, it might happen, given the complexity of the ultimate reality, that we might stumble on its fundamental algorithm, but we won't be able to realize that we did it.
Absolutely. And actually, do you know what that makes me reflect on? And this is going to sound like a complete tangent, right? But of course, this week there's been a lot of talk about AI and the fact that there's this new Chinese
And
AI model which is more efficient and all this kind of stuff. And I've been involved in this discussion about thinking machines and artificial intelligence, synthetic intelligence, all this kind of stuff. And you do come to realize is that we firstly, again, from my particular background, inside our head, we have a few pounds of fatty tissue which evolved on the plains of Africa, right? They evolved monkey brains. Why should we think that
sorry to contradict you, I just watched a news on Euronews, and they found something 2 million years ago, Romania.
it started in Africa? It didn't
Ah,
start in
yeah, okay.
Romania, but okay. But the what is the limitations of human thought? I mean, we feel like we should be able to get to that ultimate reality, but what if there's just not the power up here to do it? And so what if we pass that on, to thinking machines? It's the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy
Mhm.
scenario.
Yeah, yeah.
You get a supercomputer to work it out, right? And they work out the question, so they work out the answer, and then ultimately the ultimate question. And we're not smart enough to actually understand what these things are, what the thinking of brains bigger than ours will be. And it is my worry is that as humans, of course, we feel like we can do anything, but we clearly have physical limitations. I mean, I would love to fly like Superman, but I can't. We have physical limitations, and of course, we must have mental limitations as well. There must be a limit to what we can think about. And I know I think it's impossible for us to imagine that we have that in our head. But then we just look at a dog and realize that they must have their mental limitations as well. And we can't put ourselves in a dog's mind, etc. So yeah, I think there are issues around this question of understanding and what is even potentially within our grasp. If reality in any form is within our grasp, the universe does not have to be simple enough for evolved monkey brains to understand it.
And this is something that I hope we can tackle today, if you'd indulge me, not at this moment. Uh, there are ways known to more evolved monkeys uh, to boost our intellective capabilities. And it's something that has to do with, well, for want of a better word, we can call it the spiritual experience or the spiritual journey. It has to do with the spiritual journey, which has uh, clear, concrete, palpable physiological outcomes, including in terms of flying and grasping reality in ways that are, well, by definition, superhuman. And yeah, this is a topic that has begun to, interest me. Uh, a while ago, I haven't bulldozed into the field yet because it takes a lot of preparation, not only intellectually, uh, but I think there's something there that might assist both of us in our quest for pinpointing the ultimate reality and making sense of the universe. Um, Let me just give you a very tantalizing line. Um, I'm certain, regardless of your atheistic worldview, that as a Welshman, you have heard of Saint Columba, the famous Christian missionary to the British Isles. And there's something that he experienced. Uh, and it's this something, this experience is described more suggestively or elusively rather than explicitly by Gregory the Great, Pope of Rome in the 6th century or so, and then by Adovnan of Iona in the Life of Columba. And Adovnan of Iona describes this experience twice in the life of Columba. Uh, Initially in the prologue and then some chapter 2 or something. Um, in an ecstatic event, Columba was able to perceive the whole of reality, and that's the line used by Adovnan, as a single ray of the sun. Well, this is a tantalizing point about perceiving the universe, perceiving reality. Uh, how's that? What kind of unified, uh, comprehensive grasp of the universe that might be without your tools, without my tools, without AI? I don't know. It's something that the mind does in some instances. And this isn't the only reference to this kind of perception, this kind of permeating sight, I think, that goes through things and pinpoints aspects of reality that are still escaping us. But anyway,
I'm going to give you a slight counter here
go on.
because I have heard similar statements about seeing reality, etc., from people who have taken various substances. And what do they say? Oh, it expanded my mind. But as a from a scientific point of view, what does that mean? And that those statements about reality, what I don't hear these people saying to me is, whatever substance they've taken, oh, I've managed to advance quantum chromodynamics to include, right? It's never that kind of insight, right? It's always about there are so many colors, and I could perceive all these dimensions. So I can be a little bit skeptical when people tell me they have visions, because we know that especially in the 1960s, lots of people had an awful lot of visions, and not a lot of them were attuned to really advancing our understanding of reality.
I hear you, and I completely agree with you. And personally, I'm not at all interested. Although this is a new field of study now, really,
Hmm.
interdisciplinary study of what chemicals do to the brain, leading to visionary experiences. I'm not interested in that at all. But I believe that there are ways in which we can train our mind to develop certain insights into reality that um, might be echoed by those chemical experiences or chemically induced experiences, but there's a big difference
Yeah.
between those. But what I want to say is that I'm not suggesting that that's science. I'm just suggesting that perhaps one like Columba, equipped with your maths and your instruments, might see stuff that eludes us both today.
Yes,
That's
yes.
my
Oh,
that's
no,
my
no, no,
hope.
no, 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 no. Look, you have to remember, as a scientist, I am open to hypotheses, right? But for it to become part of science, it has to, go
Yeah,
through the steps. And I know there are famous scientists who have have experienced experimented with mild mind-altering drugs. I don't know how many of them have advanced science from those experiences, but there are definitely scientists for whom insights came in a dream. And I don't know if that dream is because you think about this stuff all the time, that when you go to bed, you can't forget about it. And that's when the answer comes. I have had those flashes of insight. I remember a long, long time ago, more than 20 years ago, I'd been working on a particular problem with a paper I was writing, and it had just evaded me. And then so I took a break, took a shower, and in the middle of the shower, ding, the answer pinged into my head. So yeah, it's a complicated process, and the process of thought and thinking is a
yeah,
complicated process. So I am open to hypotheses, but what I would need to see, of course, is the outcome. Can,
yeah.
can, can I give you another minor example
Please.
of this? Do you know? Have you ever read the 14 Times? The 14 Times is a British magazine. I don't know if it still physically exists, but it'd be one of those magazines that would collect together the mysterious and the weird and this kind of thing. So like there'd be an essay on the Loch Ness monster, or it would be mysteries, and so there would be some religion wrapped in there. There'd be the usual creatures in the wood and myths, etc. But I remember reading this article, and the article was about this person who was in contact with aliens, and the aliens spoke to them in a dream, and the aliens said, "We're here to help uh, mankind advance, etc." And so what the alien had been doing is sending this person mathematical equations, which they had been scribbling out, etc. And they said, this person who has got this high school background but didn't really do science, and they've come up with these complicated equations and etc. And so I looked at the equations, right? And I actually had to write to the 14 Times and said, this stuff is incredible because this is exactly what you find in a physics textbook. If you pick up a physics textbook, these are the equations you will see. But what they haven't given us, these aliens, is anything new, right? If they were really helping mankind, they would have gone beyond the physics textbook and told us something new. So again, it's that one step beyond that we need. Anyway,
Yeah.
sorry, I'll get off my horse now. So
No, 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 no. This is very useful, and I'm certain it's illuminating for our viewers. Uh, but I repeat, it's not what I meant.
yeah, yeah,
Even
yeah.
in my example with Columba, I firmly believe because I have seen and experienced stuff, no drug-induced whatever experiences, but I have seen stuff, and I know of a repetitive, recurrent pattern in history of people who possess certain aptitudes, cognitive, call them, intellective, call them, whatever you like, uh, that defy the norm. Uh, and I am as open-minded as possible without losing my critical reasoning to the possibility of something happening, even on a physiological and neurological level, when some people train themselves for a long time, no immediate shots or whatever, Coca-Cola, and all of a sudden I have a vision. Um, and something happens, and this is a phenomenon that would deserve study. It started already, perhaps you know, especially cognitive scientists and all that do a lot of experiments with Buddhist monks and stuff like that. For some reason, no one thinks of doing the same with Orthodox monastics who exhibit similar um, aptitudes. And the fact that two different cultures claim uh, to be able to produce this kind of outcomes that are palpable and repeated across generations is something that at least should elicit curiosity. That's it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that this would be uh, the crowning of modern science, because it's a very different approach to reality. Um, but I would love to see if this would be possible at all. One of those people learning your trade, doing your stuff, going through the throes of all your training and research and all that, and I wonder what could they see.
Hmm.
That's just me.
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, that's fine. That's fine. But
The phenomenon is there.
yes,
That's the thing. It requires rigorous testing. Yeah.
yes, yeah, yeah. I said I'm open to hypotheses. See them in action. See what the results are. That's the important part.
Okay. Shall we return to uh, our ship, as the
Yeah,
French would say?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so uh, our conversation is occasioned by the book Geraint and I wrote together. It was published last year, although the year locates it. Sorry, the publication date locates it this year, which is pretty good. We can declare it for 2014 and 2024, 2025. So we published the same book twice. And last time we talked about Geraint's contribution in the main, although I remember my buzzing him with my theological stuff. Uh, but I think the highlight, at least from my viewpoint, is uh, my admiration for you and your colleagues who not only do work at the cutting edge in terms of exploring reality and making sense of this universe of which we are a part, but also equally heroically take the extra mile to turn to a biblical trope by reaching out to us, non-scientists, giving us a sense of what you're doing and the amazing horizons that you are exploring, somehow giving us a sense of, yes, being part of your story, of your journey. And from my viewpoint, this is an enriching experience. It's borderline spiritual from my viewpoint. Not knowing your maths, your equations, I take only the conclusions and I see, wow, such a wonderful world.
Hmm. Well, I can't disagree. I mean, this is I think so. I reread your part of the book. Okay, so let me just so I very much take upon your comments there about what we do. And of course, for me, reading your aspect of the book is possibly like you wandering into a quantum mechanical course, and it's the question of terminology and language about what is being expressed. And of course, I find myself somewhat out of depth in places with just some of the phrases and goals of what you're saying. But of course, the entire interaction, I think, across theology and science, I actually think is an important one. And as I mentioned in the last time we had a chat, it's just tiring seeing sides yell at each other without just being able to talk to each other. Again, also not necessarily talking to each other in a way to convert the others, right? I think from my point of view as a human being, trying to understand how other people view the world without, beating them over the head with a physics textbook, I think is an important thing, right? Because there's already enough shouting going on in the world. We don't really need a lot more at the moment, right?
Definitely.
But I thought this week, after reading your section, I would just try and the questions that I have with how you see the scientific enterprise, okay? And as you mentioned, right, whether or not people should be afraid of what science has to say. And of course, this has been an entire ongoing process since, you know, Galileo and Copernicus and Newton, etc., who themselves had a very strong theological aspect to their lives, which has now grown into modern science. But of course, that that um, picture of modern science has changed the way in which we've interpreted the universe, and I think has meant that that things like the literal understanding of the words of the Bible have to have a bit more wiggle room in them, right? And this entire notion that uh, uh, a day in Genesis may not correspond to 24 hours. It might be something as a more fluffier concept. And so what I mean, what is your feeling then about that, how that process has gone on? Because we are going to get more scientific discoveries in the future. Uh, is it continuously a game of that the theological interpretation of what you know now has to become more flexible or has to change? And how is it reflected to what happened in the past?
Mm. That's a huge question, hu and hugely important, Geraint. Thank you. As a matter of fact, this is, believe it or not, a criticism that I hear often from fundamentalists in my whatever brand of Christianity, who say, "Well, why should we bother with engaging the sciences? of the 21st century, since today's sciences are definitely not the sciences of the early 20th century. They are way past whatever Einstein articulated in the two theories of relativity and the pioneers of quantum physics and so on and so forth. It's much more complex today. So why wasting our breath? Why not going back to 7 days times 24? There you have it. That's when the world was created with this hugely, vastly mind-blowing universe was made like 5,000 or 7,000 years ago, and full stop. Well, that's the argument. And of course, I'm not a pioneer in this field. And I think in my section I mentioned there a few 20th century pioneers of this work who tentatively, at least, if not in a very elaborate kind of way, said, well, uh, this logic, the fact that scientific advance is a reality and there are so many paradigm shifts, in science, this isn't a problem for us because if we look at early Christian theologians from the second to the fourth century, let's call it the classical Christian era, um, we see that there's already difference between an author of the second century who's largely attached to whatever science was inherited from Plato, Aristotle, and the Stoics, to the fourth century or late fourth century authors who sort of took upon themselves to become something akin to what at the time was called natural philosophers. Natural philosophers were the researchers of nature. Yeah. So, scientists in a nutshell, so to speak, given the limitations of the apparatus available to them at the time. And then people like Vladimir Lossky, a tremendous theologian, very respected of the second century, sorry, second half of the 20th century, said, well, they adopted the worldview of their time and whatever scientific knowledge was available to them. But we can see already differences from the second to the fourth century. And if we go down the track to the seventh century or the 14th century, we see tremendous changes in terms of the worldviews, let's call them scientific or philosophical worldviews these Christian theologians engaged. There are some differences. Perhaps from a distance, we don't realize how different it is, for instance, to refer to the scientific culture of, say, 12th to 14th century Byzantium, which was a tremendously Aristotelian science, basically. That was their backdrop. And they were sort of pushing forward the knowledge, even questioning some of Aristotle's assumptions and coming up with certain stuff that, well, wasn't there in Aristotle, of course. And how different this is from, say, a fifth century Platonist or so, and Lossky says we look at this history and we realize that theologians were never bothered by new research, new knowledge. They adopted that. Sometimes they adopted polemical stances in terms of certain, perhaps, ideological wrapping up of, let's call it scientific information. But otherwise, they took it for granted. We see the first signs of Ptolemaic cosmography. Ptolemy of Alexandria, the famous astronomer, lived in the early second century. Yeah, and all of a sudden you see elements of Ptolemaic cosmography in Clement, who lived a generation after him. Well, that was mind-blowing, you know. So no 7 day times 24 hours creation, stuff like that. No universe organized like a double Mac or whatever, stuff like that, you know, layers and layers and layers. Uh, his universe was that of the cutting edge of science of the time. And then we see how later in the Byzantine era, let alone in the West, when further refinements of the Copernican system occurred, sometimes even challenges of the Copernican Ptolemaic system, they adopted stances that were attuned to whatever knowledge was available to them at the time, without paying too much attention to the scientific knowledge of the ancients, out of some sense of traditionalism. Like, for example, uh, Clement feels uneasy. So the second century, towards the end of the century, and then early the first decade of the second, the third. Clement feels uneasy somehow, although he adopts the astronomy of the time, Ptolemy's geocentric system. He feels uneasy. I wrote about this in the book I just finished the other day. Um, and he mentions systems where the sun is at the center, so heliocentric systems. And he alternates this. He doesn't want to decide because he isn't a scientist, although I think he would have liked to become one. What he does is depending on the, let's call it, exegetical context of the discussion, he would present the Ptolemaic system, sometimes the heliocentric system. Well, there you have it. And Losky says, well, this is something that we see recurring through history, so much so that we need to ask a different question. It's not about why should I bother with a shifting scientific paradigm in history. It is a matter of what determined these people to embrace the available science to them, and how did they do it? So much so that on the one hand, they maintain a certain, let's call it consistent or traditional theological worldview. On the other hand, they bring this theological worldview in dialogue with a new awareness of the universe or nature that wasn't present 3, 4, 5, 10 centuries before. And this is where I come from. Given my research for almost 30 years now in this area, I realized that there's so much flexibility in the mind of these big guns, let's call them, of early Christian and medieval theology, that has nothing to do with the fundamentalism considered traditional by many Christians today. And this is what I try to do. If Basil of Caesarea in the 4th century could undertake, and he did it, to reinterpret the so-called days of creation against the backdrop of the Hellenistic science of his time. In other words, translating the theological message of Genesis from the Hebrew culture of the original book into categories, cultural, scientific categories available to his audiences. Well, this is what we are supposed to do today. And by the way, coming from Romania, I grew up in a system under the communist regime, you know, the dictatorship and all that, atheist propaganda, la la la, blah blah blah. But you know, one of the good things of that regime was that it bloody poured into us knowledge. It was a knowledge-oriented culture. If you like, a kind of enlightenment after a fashion, where they try to demolish religion, mysticism, spirituality, la la la, by um, favoring education and by supporting education. And although I didn't choose the path of the hard sciences, which I now actually regret, I chose that it was possible. Then from high school onwards, I chose the humanities. Um, I still was expected to have the basic information that was available at the time, science-wise. And I noticed that many theologians of that era were equally open to the sciences, so much so that, to cut it short, that the greatest theologian of Romania in the 20th century, Dumitru Stăniloae, died in 93 at the age of 90, um, was a trailblazer in terms of engaging stuff like quantum physics and general relativity without pedantic references. But you can see that he talks about those things in his re-articulation of Orthodox Christian cosmology in the modern era. And this is what I try to do. This is why I seek your fellowship and our discussions, and I read your stuff and the stuff of others, and so on and so forth, because I believe that if, to an extent, my contemporaries, including my, let's call them church, Christian audiences, uh, are conditioned to think in a certain way, like, for instance, an infinite universe instead of a universe that can be crossed from one edge to the other on horse in a few weeks, you know?
Hmm.
If we live in this infinite universe or the multiverse and so on and so forth, and people that I talk to actually are aware of these axioms of contemporary scientific culture, then I cannot reach out to them by talking to them in terms of geocentrism, 7 days, creation times 24 hours, and so on and so forth. And the stars are light bulbs in a solid ceiling. I can't say that. So
Hmm.
this is what I'm where I come from. And the question that I have is not how legitimate is your science. I take it for granted, and because I don't have the expertise to challenge it. I'm not one of your cosmic revolutionaries, as you call them, you know. I take it for granted, and I look with amazement at the work you do. But on the other hand, I try to make sense of at least the outcomes, or rather the shadows of what you share with us via popular outreach. I try to make sense of that in my own terms.
Hmm. Yeah. Oh, okay. No, that all sounds good there. But can I ask you a question about something you said in there about, of course, that there are some that still reject the scientific picture with regards to cosmology and the life of the universe, and of course we know um, across the big pond here, there are lots of people that object to notions of evolution and all that kind of thing. Um, so what is your feeling about those people that reject what doesn't fit with their worldview, yet are likely to accept a proton beam therapy if they have cancer and they go into a modern day hospital? How is there, and of course, people can reject whatever they want to reject, but in this logical picture of, oh, modern science is not the science that it used to be, but then neither is modern medicine, and modern medicine is built on modern science. To me, the internal inconsistencies don't quite make sense.
And they don't. And but this is where perhaps you can realize what's ahead for me and people who, like me, within the church, theologically trained people, have to grapple with in order to communicate a certain message. Uh, and yeah, that's the word, inconsistency. Because on the one hand, they reject science as demonic and an affront to religion and so on and so forth. On the other hand, they all use websites and blogs to vomit their attacks on science, keep their apps up to date, on their mobile phones, and when the case, they enjoy the benefits of scientific research by way of its technological applications, including in biotechnologies and medical technological science. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is inconsistency, and it only comes, talking again like a Romanian growing up under the communists, comes out of lack of education, ignorance. Yeah. So you can't maintain that the sciences are false, and your world was created 7,000 years ago like that, you know. Uh, and on the other hand, you go and whiten your teeth. Uh, all those fellow Christians in the United States, across the pond, as you call it, who whiten their teeth in order to preach against the sciences, but who whitens their teeth? And who fixes their problems when they are sick, and
Hmm.
so on and so forth. So this is inconsistency, and I repeat, it comes from lack of ignorance, lack of education. It comes from ignorance, which, by the way, makes these Christians lesser Christians according to the standards of my favorite hero, Clement of Alexandria, who believed that the ecclesia, what we call the church, is a society of people whose main goal is to acquire knowledge. And they are supposed to push themselves through education, reflection, meditation, whatever you want to call it, contemplation, as Clement would have it, uh, towards uh, putting behind bias, false assumptions, preconceived ideas, and embrace reality as reality is revealed to them by way of research and sometimes by way of vision.
Yeah. So I mean, this is something, of course, I think about quite a lot. I very much agree with you. It's the education issue, and of course, here in Australia and elsewhere, there are people involved in designing curricula that bring um, their worldview into what should be taught when it comes to science, etc., which maintains the ignorance, right? Um, so, what is your feeling? What would you say to your fellow theologians about how they should go about being engaged in modern science? I mean, I do feel that, as you said, some might want to close their ears, and I'm sure that there are many that have a passing interest, etc. But what is the right way forward, do you think, for somebody who wants to be involved in this engagement between the two? What should they be doing?
Hmm. Again, that's a very important one. Um, I think I made a reference to this in the introduction to our book. Maybe not, maybe somewhere else. I wrote in 2023, well, it was written earlier, but it was published in 2023, an article about Orthodox Science-Engaged Theology. I don't remember the exact title. Um, and I discussed there this topic up front, and I said, look, it's not a matter of becoming scientists unless we want to become scientists.
Hmm.
I would love to go back to the drawing board and reinvent myself, learning maths and the sciences and so on. Maybe one day, upon retirement, I'll do something along those lines. Uh, but there's something that we can still do insofar as we are true disciples of Christ, and Christ taught us to seek the truth that liberates us. That's his word. John chapter 8, around verse 30, 31. Seek the truth, and the truth will free you. So, if we are truly disciples of Christ, we have the mandate of seeking the truth. And if this entails to demolish our idols, our preconceived ideas, Well, tough luck, but that's the mandate. And um, what I say, practically speaking, is there's always popular science, um, uh, especially that popular science written by real scientists, not by popularizers who sort of try to make sense of the sciences. But there are many scientists who are engaged, like you, are engaged in communicating cutting edge science and knowledge to wider audiences. And I said it's part and parcel of our mandate. But it's not so bad for us Orthodox Christians, although many prefer to go the easy way, keep it simple. In other words, stay dumb. That's how it translates. Stay dumb. Um, there are many Orthodox who actually either have double expertise, scientific and theological, or even not having a background in the hard sciences, uh, keep reading popular science, as I do. Um, Let me give you an example. One of the colleges, theological colleges with which I'm affiliated in Australia, St. Cyril's Coptic Orthodox Theological College. It's a very small thing, established in 2016, 17, something like that. Still struggling to find its way in the world. Um, there's an openness there. At least I found that openness in some of my colleagues, and one of them, a Coptic priest, is trained as a philosopher and a theologian, a philosopher in the cognitive kind of area, the science, sorry, the philosophy of the mind, and so on and so forth. And he has built a course which he calls apologetics, which is a funny way of referring to what he does, because usually apologetics is Christians are right, scientists are wrong, the Trump kind of thing. You 10,000 or how many scientists are in the United States, you are wrong because I sit on this table and I say I'm right, you know. My colleague calls this apologetics perhaps as a way of catching fish, in other words, bringing customers. Um, but what he does is very nuanced, and he actually talks about the autonomy of disciplines, of the fact that if you don't have expertise in that discipline, you cannot actually contest anything about that discipline, and you either take it or you leave it. But don't say that you know better just because you have a different opinion, which might be formed elsewhere. In other words, from the viewpoint of a different expertise that has nothing to say about cosmology or astrophysics or something, and there you have it. And there's another colleague I have. I mentioned him last time, Chris Knight. Um, and he is now an affiliate of the Cambridge-based Institute of Orthodox Christian Studies, who is an astrophysicist by training, and who embraced Orthodox Christianity, became a priest, and so on and so forth. And all of his work is at the cutting edge of science and religion. And he's very cogent in his discourse, and at this stage, I don't think there's anyone to match him in this world of science and religion, at least from the viewpoint of Orthodox contributors. Um, and so there are things that are in motion, um, but unfortunately, um, this brand of theologians is considered by the ignorant masses. I'm sorry to put it that way, but this is what they are: ignorant masses, uneducated ignorant masses that have nothing to do with even their tradition. They ignore their tradition because without research, my kind of research, they have nothing to say about that tradition, and they know nothing about the scientific culture of our age. And most of us are marginalized, considered heretics, and so on and so forth. Really, I'm not kidding you. So this is my personal pain. As a matter of fact, I had to leave my country because of a tremendous turn of perspective in my department, in the Faculty of Orthodox Theology in the University of Bucharest, where all of a sudden the generation of my professors were all, open-minded, educated overseas and stuff like that, was replaced by a bunch of epigons who danced on the music sang by the fundamentalists who are on the rise, still are on the rise, so much so that I have no place there. I have never been invited in 20 years after leaving Romania. I have never been invited back to my faculty to say a talk, to give a paper, to something. Can you imagine that? So
Hmm.
this is the environment, and of course it's a terrible moment of crisis because this isn't the Christianity of Christ. This is anything else but that. We're no longer disciples of the one who teaches us seek the truth. The truth will make you free. No, we are idolatrous.
Okay. Yeah. 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 I guess it's a lot harder now that we live in a post-truth world, right? Whatever that really means, but truth.
Still, you said earlier you are seeking the truth, which is
Yeah. 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 Um, Look, I'm not sure how much time we got, but I thought I'd try and finish on a bit of a biggie question here, because of course the last part of the book is focused on the self
Mm,
and the question of consciousness and mind, and of course it is still at some level as mysterious to science as it is to just any other worldview, right? Consciousness, does it reside in the stuff inside your head, etc. I know that there's a lot of people working in the sciences trying to understand the behavior of the brain and if consciousness arises from complex networks and all this kind of stuff. But of course, there are those in the panpsychic kind of community. Consciousness is what's at the bottom, and the universe is built that way. Others who think that consciousness and the soul are somewhat separate to the physical and remain, etc. So here we go. This is a hypothetical, and I'm not sure if this is going to have a good reaction or bad, but let's try it. But let's imagine that uh, a decade from now, uh, some scientist has managed to isolate consciousness in the sense that they have shown it to be purely physical. Consciousness is the electrical activity inside your head, and therefore it is something that can be reproduced on a machine. Also, it's physical. There's nothing else needed, etc. Right? Now, the last part of the book, you wrote a lot about consciousness and the self and the cosmos, etc. What would it do to you, to theology, if suddenly consciousness falls into that scientific umbrella that it's physical, we understand it, etc. What's left?
mm. Yeah, well, as a matter of fact, that possibility was discussed in theology time and again. And we are supposed to engage that possibility of a mind or consciousness that isn't something different, ontologically speaking, physically speaking, from the body. Uh, yeah. And we can't say that because regardless of how Christian we see ourselves to be, we still read what Christians call the Old Testament, the Hebrew Scriptures, where the duality of mind-body doesn't exist. Yeah. So we have to read those scriptures, and we consider them as authoritative as the Christian New Testament scriptures. Um, and in what we Christians call the Old Testament, we don't find the duality of soul and body, or mind and body. It's a very complex kind of anthropology there, and the whole discussion about uh, what we are, what are the components of our human nature, isn't at the forefront of that kind of wisdom literature. What's its focus is how we are in regard to God. That's a very different question. And I think this suits me very well. If you're a scientist in 10 days, 10 years, 100 years, we'll discuss this and we'll find out that in reality, what we call the mind is an embodied thing. It's part and parcel of what we are physically, biologically, neurologically, and so on and so forth, speaking. Um, that wouldn't bother me at all because for me, as a theologian, as a Christian believer, this it'll be the same question remaining. What am I in relation to this entity we call God? So that's the question, and this is what I try to do. But yes, as you pointed out, I keep talking about the self and so on and so forth, and perhaps there's something that I haven't made very clear. I'm not trying at the end of the book to offer on an alternative to cosmology, to physics, to astrophysics, and so on and so forth. What I'm trying to say is that regardless of what my nature is, where my mind is, what my mind is it part of this biological entity? Is it distinct from it? So regardless of what's the outcome of any deliberation of research to that effect, uh, I ask questions. And I'm troubled by the desire to know, to clarify things, to make sense of reality. And there's something tremendously significant about it, and I don't want that kind of sparkle of greatness manifested in curiosity or wonder, whatever you want to call it, desire to know, research, and so on and so forth. I don't want that to be quashed by any kind of narrative that says, well, you are just a speck of dust and you don't matter. So call it anthropocentrism, call it whatever you like, but I believe that somehow we need this kind of complementary message, something that complements the rigorous science and brings back the me. Uh, I am doing this research. You aren't doing that research. And we matter uh, as researchers, as people seeking the truth, reality, you name it. Um, and there's something so crucial about this quest that can enrich our life and make it not only bearable, it can make it beautiful. But that's my message. That's what I try to say. So
Yeah.
that discovery won't bother me at all.
No, okay. Well, that's good to hear. And that notion of, yeah, I know some people say that, oh, physics, cosmology makes us feel insignificant on a cosmic scale. But fair enough. Most things in the universe are insignificant on a cosmic scale. But I think we have to remember that we don't inhabit the entire cosmos. We inhabit the surface of one planet with, and we don't really know if there are any other planets we could live on, and therefore we matter to each other. And people seem to forget that a little bit. But again, I don't want to come across John Lennon and Kumbaya, but I am a firm believer that humans matter to humans. Not
Yeah.
all of them, but there's a group that they matter to.
Yeah. Yeah, of course, we cannot be divine beings embracing everyone, this universal love and so on and so forth, but at least we can do the best we can to reach out to one another and consider with respect and even admiration different opinions, because all these opinions matter on a subjective level.
Yeah,
Yeah. Not scientifically wise, even theologically, but it is important to see how different we are perceiving reality, how differently we are thinking about one another, and so on and so forth. And instead of finding this as a reason to kill each other, expel each other, deport each other, or whatever, it is a reason to stick together and
yeah,
hearing, listening to one another. Well, which is what I do. I
yeah,
try to
yeah.
listen to you.
I completely agree. I completely agree. Seeing we're on a high point, but perhaps this is where we should wrap up.
And yeah, thank you once again for the opportunity and loved your questions.
Oh, good, good. Well, I said, when one wanders into somebody else's field, it's a stranger in a strange land, and if you're, it's very easy for you to look very stupid. So I'm glad that the questions at least had a chance to bring something out.
And really, they were spot on and very profound. And thank you for engaging my whatever humble undertaking of engaging your own
Yep,
contribution.
yep. And look, let's talk more about the universe in the future. I'd be more than happy to.
Wonderful. I look forward to it.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.